In this video, we will explore what strange, challenging, and unfair things happen to unwanted children in the Middle Ages. We delve into the peculiar and unjust experiences of unwanted children, shedding light on an often overlooked aspect of history. Hey guys! Welcome to Historical Gossip. In this channel, we do what humans have done best since we've evolved to be a super-aware being. Gossiping! Many reasons existed for not wanting a child in the Middle Ages, despite families being large. The primary reason was economic. After a certain number of children, having one more mouth to feed became a catastrophe for the family. This issue particularly affected peasants who made up the majority of the population. The number of children had to be precisely what was needed to work and fully utilize the land. Having one more child could mean extreme poverty. Women took precautions to avoid becoming pregnant, sometimes using abortive methods. However, these methods could fail, and recognizing a pregnancy could be difficult. Many women only realized they were pregnant when their bellies began to swell. In times of poverty, aborting a pregnancy was a dangerous option, so the more common alternatives were abandonment or infanticide. But infanticide was considered a serious crime and punished harshly. In some cases, it was made to look like an accidental death, such as suffocating the baby in its bed. Strangely, more female infants died than males, as females were considered less desirable. If caught, a mother's poverty could sometimes serve as a mitigating factor. In some cases, the act was punishable by the death penalty. In luckier cases, unwanted children were entrusted to other families. But in most cases, they were sold or simply abandoned. Children had very few rights and were considered less important than adults. In addition to economic reasons, there were instances where parents did not want their children due to deformities or poor health. This was not solely due to economic concerns, but also because people believed that children born with deformities or illnesses were the result of conception during menstruation, breastfeeding, or Lent, behaviours which were forbidden by common morality. Therefore, these children represented evidence of their parents' immoral conduct. There were also cases of twins attributed to adulterous behaviour, which led the mother of the twins, even if innocent, to get rid of one of them to avoid accusations of adultery. In the late Middle Ages, another reason emerged for abandoning children. When parents decided to embrace the religious life by becoming priests or nuns, they had to leave their families and children. Starting in the 13th century, marriage for priests was prohibited, but this did not lead to a decrease in the number of their children. The children of priests were considered illegitimate and could not enter religious orders, contract valid marriages, or legally inherit it. In the latter half of the 13th century, the Bishop of Liege boasted of fathering 14 male children in just 22 months. However, after the imposition of celibacy, no clergyman boasted of such achievement. The fate of abandoned children varied. They were sometimes taken in by those who turned them into slaves or prostitutes. In many other cases, they did not survive and their bodies were found in rivers. It was a common practice among prostitutes to get rid of newborns by throwing them into rivers to spare them a tragic fate. To address this situation, the foundling wheel was devised, a kind of rotating hollow barrel where infants could be anonymously deposited. Upon the sound of a bell, the wheel would be turned and the infant would be taken inside to be cared for by the church staff. Initially, infants were left on the thresholds of churches, monasteries, and convents, but later secular institutions and organizations managed abandoned children, establishing short-term orphanages and hospitals. The first foundling wheel appeared in France at the Hospital of the Canons of Marseille in 1188. This practice spread to Italy, Greece, and Spain, but not to Germanic and Anglo-Saxon countries where infants' bodies continued to be found in sewers and dumped, often alongside the newborn, a broken coin or something else that might allow for future reunion with the parents would be left. It was also important to communicate whether the child had been baptized or not. Overall, the Church viewed abandonment as an inevitable aspect of the world, similar to poverty and slavery, and while it didn't explicitly condemn it, it sought to manage it. The primary concern of the Church was to recover abandoned children to baptize them, because in medieval society, the concern for the salvation of the soul outweighed the child's physical salvation. Initially, during baptism, the newborn was immersed in baptismal water 3 times, but this practice was not without risks. Later, they switched to aspersion, which involved pouring water on the child's forehead. If a child was found dead and there was doubt about whether they had been baptized, they were buried in consecrated cemeteries. Laws concerning abandonment varied depending on the time and country in the Middle Ages. In some places, the regulations regarding abandonment included severe penalties. For example, during the Norman rule in Sicily, the law mandated nose cutting for mothers who sold their daughter. In Spain, in the Castilian kingdom in the 13th century, parents who caused the death of their exposed child faced the death penalty. Later, parents were allowed to sell their children due to starvation or destitution, with the proceeds intended to sustain the rest of the family. However, in the 13th century, in Italy, cannibalism of children occurred due to a terrible famine. During a siege in Spain, Jewish individuals consumed the flesh of their own children. A unique case was that of oblate children who lived in monasteries but had not been abandoned. Parents could choose to offer a child as a permanent gift to a monastery. This was a common practice in high medieval society. Oblate children could be offered from birth or enter the monastery typically around the age of 7. Parents provided a sum of money to the monastery for the child's upkeep, and the child received a religious education and training for monastic life. Oblate children were often younger siblings of noble families seeking to preserve the family's heritage, or female children of the aristocracy. They could also be excess children born into poor and simple family. However, this practice had a downside. As adults, they paid with their freedom. They were educated to become members of the church and, in some cases, couldn't return to secular life. Rules regarding the fate of oblate children varied during the early Middle Ages. Some prelates believed that oblates could independently decide whether to continue their monastic life once they reached an age where they could make independent decisions. However, several councils between the 6th and 7th centuries imposed the rule that oblates could not return to secular life. The oblates were committed to a life of obedience, poverty, and chastity forever, and anyone who escaped this monastic life received a sentence of excommunication. In summary, the Middle Ages witnessed complex and harsh realities for unwanted children, testing society's compassion. And you guys, were you aware of this dark side of history involving children?